Welcome back to the channel. In an ideal world, I'd have got this video out before the end of the year. It is in fact being recorded on New Year's Eve, but it's not going to get out before midnight. Due in part to I got distracted watching Mr. Aiden F1's 2020 awards show, which was brilliant, and I thoroughly recommend you guys watch. But this one's my last in my looking at my season previews for F1, F2 and F3, and today it's the F3. So let's have a look at it. Alright, so let's go. Hi. A lot of junior formula stuff out at the minute, but it's the build up to the season and I really wanted to do something as I've not covered junior formulas for a while, so at some point of this next week what I'm hoping to do is release some videos covering both Formula 3, Formula 2 and of course Formula 1 before the season starts. Yeah, I've done this a bit backwards to how I originally recorded it because I started off with the Formula 1 not knowing if I'd get round to the others, but because I enjoyed doing that I did them anyway. But this one's the last one I'll be looking at. What I came up across as an idea a few weeks back. I was doing a thing with Ollie from TGSF1 where obviously he has his 10 in 10 that he's doing at the moment, and I covered Alfa Romeo, and it struck me as doing a 10-minute section where it's controlled and you have to try and talk in that period stops things from getting a bit carried away and out of hand, which tends to be something I'm occasionally guilty of. So if I'm trying to get these videos done, that seems like a good place to start. On there, I have my 10-minute timer set, and it is going now. So, Formula 3. Talking about drivers in it, let's first start with the Prema guys. Oscar Piastri, of course, won Formula Renault Euro Cup last year. Very talented guy. He's also raced, I think it was his second season in that. He's also, of course, raced in British F4. And going in at Prema, especially being part of the Renault Academy and coming in off the back of winning a title, it's just it puts him in a very strong position to do quite well in that championship. But Prema are the top team, and right next door to him you've got Frederick. And didn't he do well winning it? As we're going to discuss, he had some strong drivers next to him, so coming in it was always going to be a challenge, but it was one he met, and it's left him in a good position going forward. Vesti, who won the Formula European Regional Championship last year, and it wasn't a close run thing either. So he's also another very strong contender for the championship at that team. Logan Sargent competed in British Formula 4. He's also was in Blancpain Formula Renault Euro Cup. Wow. Yeah, I'll get it right eventually. And he went in as a rookie in that championship and took some wins. He was looking pretty decent. I think if it hadn't been for Christian Lundgaard in there that year, he could have ended up top rookie. But last year he was at Carlin and they didn't get on top of the car very well, so his representative performances were not perhaps where you might expect them to be. But second year in the season, most experienced with the car out of the drivers in the Prema team, and Prema team are top outfit. So if they're on form, fully expect him to be fighting for wins and podiums as well. There's not a weak driver in that lineup. It was just one of them weird seasons where you had about 4 drivers who, if one race result had been different, they could have won the championship. Logan could well have walked away with that one. But, history will record it that he finished where he did. And it's possible that may have affected where he'd have ended up for next year. Because at the moment, he's not looking, from the sound of it, like he's going to be ending up in the top seat, which is a little bit worrying for him, perhaps. Moving on to High Tech now, which was the team that ran Prema closest last year. It's sort of similar to Logan Sargent to a certain extent. You've got Max Fewtrell. He's weirdly, perhaps in the High Tech outfit, he seems to be the one people are talking about least. But he's a British F4 champion. He in his second year in Formula Renault Euro Cup, he won that title. He had been top rookie the year before. And he seems a nice guy. One a couple of times I've run into him. So I genuinely think he's actually in with a shout. If High-Tech can get as good a handle on the car as Prema have, then I genuinely think he's in with as good a shot as any of the others in those two teams. But he is teammates with both Liam Lawson and Dennis Hauger. I can't fault my logic regarding Max because he is that good. He has won them championships. Why it's gone wrong, or went wrong for him last year, I don't know. I don't think he knows from what I can work out. But we'll come back to that one, I think. And those two very highly rated, very highly thought of and fancied Red Bull juniors. So they've got form as well. Liam Lawson was second in ADAC a few years ago, I think it was. He managed to beat Marcus Armstrong to the Toyota Racing Series. Marginal, very, very marginal, 2 years ago. Last year, the problem is he was with MP Motorsport last year, and I never like to knock MP Motorsport because they're a proper race team. You know, they go out to compete and for the love of racing, which I always like and always have time for. But they're not a team which you're necessarily going to win too many titles with. Whereas this year, stepping up to High-Tech, especially in his second season, you've got to fancy him as being certainly a contender for the title. Previous form shows, you know, he's good for it. He can compete at the front. Then you've got... But for a couple of engine blow-ups and bad luck and a crash... he would have been right up there. On pure pace alone, he was as quick as anyone else last year in F3. But sometimes you make your own luck, and there were incidents that perhaps could have been avoided, but the boy's quick. Dennis Hauger is the other Red Bull junior there. He's the rookie in the team, but he comes in, he's got a seriously good pedigree. Came second in ADAC F4 last year, won the Italian F4 title. He's been competitive in the other things he's raced in. He's got a serious amount of wins across the various formulas he's raced in. So you can't rule him out. The thing is, you'd say top rookie potentially until you get to the... This is what I mean. Quality. You know, CV, absolute quality. Bit like Max, what the hell happened? The thing is, if you then look at the end of the season, he went and moonlighted a little bit in Formula Regional European Championship, where he was one of the strongest guys in it, having came in right at the tail end of the season. You know, next year he'll be 2021 he'll be racing for Prema, and you'd have to say he's in a strong position to take that championship. So what the hell happened? Well, who knows? The IoT team. And the guy everyone is talking about as potential champion in F3 because he's not been beaten to a title, and Teo Pocher. And won ADAC last year. It's French F4 champion as well. And he is the person that people are talking about the most. He's just knocking titles off at a canter. You know, him and Dennis Hauger actually are both very young guys still, so if they don't quite get it right this year, then obviously they've got time to build up in the future. But obviously momentum is momentum, and it doesn't can take one bad season to derail you. But people are fancying him, you know. If they're putting money on it, there's a lot of people putting their bets behind him. Rightly so, as it turned out. You know, strong, really strong, consistent results. And so I don't think people were necessarily expecting him to be that strong. If you look at the grid and you look, he wasn't in a Prema. To finish second, splitting the Premas and be right up there mixing it with them, very good result. Considering his age as well, he's got a very strong, should have a very good future ahead of him. LT have at the top of what I'd consider the top three teams, they've got arguably the weakest driver lineup. Because other than him, the next guy they've got in line is Alexis Smolia, who finished third in Formula Renault last year and had some really decent performances. But it tended to be when he was hot, he was hot. When he wasn't. And I don't think he's consistent enough to really challenge for the F3 title. But then I could be wrong.
I wasn't wrong. He had his moments, but it looked average at the sharp end.
Because, nobody expected Nikita Mazepin to be challenging for a title the other year, and he managed to.
Wince.
So, different drivers react differently to different cars. He may surprise us. Moving on past that, because I'm not even going to bother with the other guy in the IoT. At HWA Race Labs, last year they looked on the verge of getting into like the top three teams, and Jake Hughes was regularly fighting out with them. So he's there for another year. I mean, absolute veteran compared in terms of age to the other guys, but then he came to racing late. But because he was with the team last year and he knows the car and he knows the team, he's basically serves as a very good benchmark for the others. The other two being Enzo Fittipaldi, Ferrari Junior. Since
I hold by what I said about Jake, he does have pace. What he doesn't have is any money. So he sort of is stuck in a position where wilderness where he can't really move up and he can't stay doing what he's doing forever. Last year he had a lot of strong races, but certainly at the early point in the season he ended up getting stuck in a lot of situations. Not necessarily his fault, he had a lot of bad luck. Again, the points don't necessarily result or show how fast or capable his season was, I don't think. But let's go on to Enzo, because here's an interesting one.
It's the end of 2016, so respected and liked within there. He finished second to Frederick Vesti last year in European Formula Regional and was competitive. I think when he learns the car, he'll run decently. Whether he'll be able to compete for, I can't see him winning the title though. I mean, Ferrari Junior, I always like to sort of back them and try and sort of think, maybe they can do it, but quite honestly, I'd be surprised if he's within the top 5 or 6 in the championship. And nothing against him, but it's very competitive at the sharp end. And the other guy,
Enzo took a long time to seem to get into it and get up to speed. He always seemed to run reasonably in the race, but qualifying pace just wasn't there. And the problem is, if you're qualifying mid-pack in a grid of 30-odd cars, you're in trouble because you never really get seen. You're fighting away for nothing, which is unfortunate, because certainly at the end of the season you could see you had some decent racecraft and whatever going on. So I think next year, if providing he maintains the momentum, he should do well.
Guy in the HWA Race Labs team, Jack Doohan. Again, Red Bull Junior. Seems to be hit and miss. People have differing opinions on him. He is clearly a talented guy, but compared to the other 3 Red Bull Juniors that are in there, is he missing that little bit for a title? I don't know.
See Dennis Hauger. He's another guy who basically needs a stronger season next year. We'll see whether he gets it.
Him and Dennis Hauger were in British F4 the other year, and it was like Dennis Hauger finished higher in the main championship, and Jack Doohan finished higher in the rookie championship. I've heard it suggested that Dennis Hauger is perhaps the more measured guy. He's not quite so likely to go for that rash move, whereas Jack Doohan may be more akin to a sort of dive up the inside. Again, I mean, you'd fancy Dennis over Jack just because High Tech probably have the edge over HWA Race Labs. But it's margins, it's slim margins at this point.
The way their seasons went is pretty much irrelevant, to be honest with you.
Teams after that, you've got Charus Racing Systems. The most interesting one there is you've got Fraga, who of course is the other guy in the Red Bull Junior program, who's had the weirdest run into top level racing possibly imaginable. I don't really know enough about his junior career beyond he was apparently doing like racing, but the money ran out, as these things tend to have a habit of doing, unfortunately, unless you're properly minted. But he then ended up racing online racing and got good enough at that, you know, his dad begged, borrowed, stole, talked to anyone worth talking to try and get him back into proper racing again. And since then, Formula Regional last year, he was properly battling with Enzo Fittipaldi for a large part of the season, and then went over to race in TRS Toyota Racing Series and actually won that, which not many people were expecting, perhaps. So he's older than a lot of the other drivers in it just because of the route he had to take to get into there. But he's very much the poster child for, you know, people who've not been able to go racing for a while, so they've had to come in through different routes. Or it's like if he can get to the top flight, he's like, you know, almost proof positive that you don't have to be loaded to necessarily find your way up. There are other avenues available that you can explore, you know, that you can get your name known. So,
unfortunately, Charus failed to deliver pretty much altogether, and Igor disappeared into the midfield, where we hardly heard from him at all unless he was having an incident all year. With what that will do to his career going forward, I don't know. We wait to see where he'll turn up next year. I'm so good with that 10-minute alarm.
I still had rather a lot of drivers on here that I could have been talking about. Quickly, other people worthy of note. Enaam Ahmed, I've got to mention him because I've followed him since 2016. I think he is genuinely a very talented guy, and I'm liking to see him back on a properly competitive grid again. I know he raced in Japanese F3 last year, but change of culture, jump around, didn't even know if he was going to be racing 2 months prior to that, so very disjointed season for him. So knowing a bit more about what he's going to be doing this year got to be good for him.
But it didn't work out that way, and Carlin again had a dodgy season and no idea what happened to him. With any luck, he'll get a drive somewhere next year, but I'm pretty sure it won't be back in F3 equipment. We'll see.
Clement Novalak again and the Carlin. If Carlin can actually get on top of the car this year, those two have got a chance.
Clement had a better season, but yeah.
And the other guy I'm going to talk about is Richard Vishaw, who, again, I've been following for a number of years. He should really be racing an F2. But after basically getting dropped by Red Bull, I think he's just suffered some quite severe budgetary restraints that have sort of stopped him necessarily from regressing as much as he should have done. Such is the way with these things. I can't necessarily... Honestly, I'd have difficulty picking a top 6.
Richard Vishaw's another one who I think is very talented, but for budgetary reasons or what have you, just never seems to quite be able to make that next step. I can imagine him ending up in GT cars and stuff and doing very well because he's clearly a very talented guy. But for whatever... MP, he sort of seems to be around because that's the Dutch team. He knows them, they like him. You know, he won Macau. You know, he has talent, lots of talent. But I don't think he's in danger of winning any championships just because he can't get that drive that he would need to have to do it. But the talent's there to do well. but last season was a little bit inconsistent, and whether that was him or the team, I'm not 100% sure. At the end of the day, he's driving the car. It's got to come down to him, I suppose, at the end of the day.
Or what order they were going to end up in, because I like so many of these drivers and there's some proper talent at the sharp end of it.
Still stand by that. It was a very talented grid of the top 15, 20 or so drivers. Obviously there were some complete disasters in there as well, but there you go.
So I'll cut it down to basically the top 6 or so, which is going to be Piastri, Vesti and Sargent. They're all racing for Prema. There's no way Prema are going to drop the ball so badly. Their drivers are not going to be at the sharp end. Similar with High Tech, Max Fewtrell, second year, and he is multiple champion in other series, so you can't rule him out. Leon Lawson, Dennis Hauger, again, proper top talents. Theo Pocher, who everyone's money seems to be on. Igor Fraga, possibly. Jake Dennis. That's a blast from the past. Jake Hughes, possibly. So, and I'd love to see Enaam Ahmed up there racing as well, and Richard Verschoor, because, as I said, there's so many names and so many people I'm looking forward to seeing on track. But the whole reason I set the timer was to try and shorten this video. So I'm going to stop now and say, I want to see Max do it.
And the curse of the... Yeah, the curse strikes again. I did this to Marcus Armstrong, where I said, yeah, I think Marcus will win it. And that aged really badly, and this went even worse, apparently. I say, I stand by what I said. I genuinely think that Max is a great driver. Unfortunately, he's a great, talented British driver in a time where you've got you've got three very talented British drivers in F1. There was Alex Albon, who I know is like Thai British, but he still came through the British racing sort of scene. Then you've got guys like Dan Ticktum, you've got Callum Eilert. So he's a very talented British driver at a time, unfortunately, where there are a lot of British talented young drivers out there, which I think has probably not helped him.
See Max Fewtrell win. He probably won't, but because it's a quality grid. But I'm going to say Max because he's good. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye. Have your own opinions as well if anyone wants to say in the comments who they think, because I'm pretty sure they'll probably disagree with what I said. But thank you anyway. Bye bye. Bye.
Then it would be fair enough. Love that picture. It's a great picture. So in case anyone didn't believe me what I was saying about it being New Year's Eve while I'm recording this. Yeah. So predictably, my main big prediction about who would win it was massively far off, which is unfortunate. I want to see Max racing. I look forward to seeing Max back racing at some point. Where he's going to go from here, I don't know. Possibly Euro Formula Open maybe, but that's sort of a step sideways and down, because it tends to be the series you end up racing in if you're struggling for budget a little bit. But yeah, Yafei went there last year and went on a bit of a redemption trip, so that's a possibility. Obviously Felipe Drugovich came through there, and so did Marina Sato. So it's a possible route, but we'll have to wait and see where he confirms. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening to me going through my previous predictions and seeing what I thought. It's always fun watching these things back. A little bit alarming sometimes. It's just sort of like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, Enaam, I'm so sorry, Max. But that's the way it goes. You can only go on previous results and what you've seen, and stepping into different material and teams with different equipment sometimes, especially in heavily stacked grids. I mean, there's 30 cars on that grid. If you get it wrong a little bit, you're in the midfield and you're nowhere. So it can be very tricky, and things do not always go out the way you'd hope or think they would do. But that's enough of me anyway. Bye bye for now, and have a great new year.